Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jonathan Roll. I'm a director at AT&T in the labs organization, and I want to spend some time with you today sharing with you a little bit about infrastructure deployment and how we do infrastructure deployment and how we could do it even better with OpenStack. So we'll spend a few minutes together here, and then we'll go more in depth tomorrow so you can get kind of a taste of what we'll talk about in tomorrow's discussion here today, and then decide whether you want to come back and join us to go deeper tomorrow. So scaling OpenStack is, just as it is in the software space, in the hardware space, it's also a non-trivial undertaking. We have the opportunity to get into trouble pretty quickly if we're not careful about how we build out OpenStack infrastructure. So I always like to start by beginning with the end in mind. I find that helps kind of build a vision for what it is that you're going to try to accomplish over the next n number of weeks or months. So begin with the end in mind. One of the challenges, obviously, this is a classic engineering problem. Typically, you want to achieve all three of these. You want to be better, you want to be faster, and hopefully you want to be cheaper too, or at least provide more value. But a lot of times we can only solve for two of those three. So we have to be, again, very careful. Otherwise, we can wind up introducing a lot of risk into our infrastructure that ultimately doesn't serve the end needs of the business and may not even achieve two of these three. Just like great companies and great leaders see market trends before other people see them, and they see them before they even occur. Often they see them before they even know there's a market there. When we're building out OpenStack infrastructure within AT&T, we have to anticipate those market trends as well, except instead of an external market, it's more of an internal market, because within the labs organization, my customers are end users who are developing applications for the market, like 5G. So we need to know what their demands are before they give them to us, because if we wait, then we'll be late, and we won't be able to launch on time what we need to do. So with some basic tenets of vision, planning, clarity, stability, some running rules, instilling a DevOps culture in everything that we do, foresight, automation, accountability, and a constant feedback loop to make sure that these ideas are integrated and are actually beginning to pay off. We believe, and we have seen evidence, that we can achieve at least two of these three, and we can scale our OpenStack infrastructure in a powerful way. But without intervention, there's still a lot of risk. I think in the best case, the risk is basically proportionate to the number of environments that we deploy, pods, clusters, whatever is sort of your default size of infrastructure. With each one of those, if you don't have the proper plan and you don't have the proper set of requirements, then your risk will go up with each next environment that you go and build. Unfortunately, the situation is actually worse. I think it actually looks more like this, because these environments are actually part of a larger ecosystem. And that ecosystem, you stand to actually lose a lot more of your investment than just the environments themselves. You lose all of your IT and development cycles around that, and you create more messes for everybody to have to go clean up in your organization, again, without proper planning. So I think it's more of an exponential phenomenon that actually ultimately leads to crashing the cloud business case if you're not managing that risk well. So what I call smart scaling would be the goal. So how can we take these curves and essentially bend them better than the best hope into the best possible outcome? And that's what we'll spend more time tomorrow talking about, is some of these techniques and best practices that we've learned internally through years of launching different large-scale initiatives, not just OpenStack and not just cloud, but the original 5G network with the iPhone and others. So smart scaling really is the key. And with that, we reduce our risks and we manage our risks. And that allows us to scale our OpenStack deployments faster and safer and more efficiently. So the goal is to basically get as fast as we possibly can at deploying OpenStack network infrastructure with minimal risk. The building blocks to do that, and again, we'll discuss more of these tomorrow, but fundamentally, kind of looks like this. Everything begins with requirements, just like it does in software. Same too with hardware. It also requires a design. Anyone can go and buy racks of servers and put OpenStack on them. But to really get that to scale well takes, again, foresight and vision. And you need a forecast to understand how big is this going to be. Do I need to procure, 2 megawatts worth of capacity, or do I need to procure like 80 megawatts worth of capacity? And then where does this need to be? Are we concerned with latency, like in the case of the 5G use case, where we're trying to achieve 1 millisecond of latency, or is 20 or 30 or 100 milliseconds acceptable? Maybe it is, it just depends. So what are those requirements? That's a foundation, and unless you have solid and reliable requirements, the goal of driving down the cost and the risk to deploy infrastructure will continue to evade your organization. And then there's preparation. Armed with those key data points, you've got to make sure all the other pieces come into line. The logistics, site readiness, you've got to ensure that you have sufficient funding. I know at AT&T, funding is a finite resource. Some companies, it's easier than others, but it is in general a finite resource, even for the largest, most successful businesses, web scale firms and others. So you want to be careful how you're spending the dollars. Sourcing, do you have contracts set up? Is your supply chain primed to actually go and scale to the extent that your forecast says you'll need to? And are those suppliers going to be ready in time with what exactly you need and where you need it? And then from an execution perspective, now that you have all your raw materials or packaged components, you need to begin installation. Do you know how to do the installation? What if you have a problem? How do you validate the environment, that it's working well? How do you turn it up? And lastly, how do you integrate it after everything's been validated, is up and running, and you need to integrate the final product to lead up to in service. So that's obviously the goal. All this other stuff is pre-work, but it does take time, and it takes diligence to do it in a way to maximize your efficiency. So again, begin with the end in mind. And if you have vision and you have planning and foresight, clear, stable requirements. Requirements are always subject to change, but you have to focus on trying to stabilize those to the maximum extent possible. Driving accountability with your user teams. Incorporating a DevOps culture so that you can ensure that your operations team is on board with you, supporting you every step of the way, and that what they inherit can actually be supported in the long term on day 2 and beyond. Automation to go fast and to catch errors and problems before they become, epidemics. Running rules to keep everybody playing within the lines. And then again, constant feedback to make sure all of this is working together well. So thank you for listening. If you're interested in hearing more, we'll go in depth tomorrow morning at 9:50 in the morning in rooms 401, 402, upstairs in the hall on the meeting room level. And I appreciate your time. My name is Jonathan Roll from AT&T, and appreciate the time you spent with me today. Thank you.